The blizzard that swallowed the Montana high country had buried everything: the wagon roads, the barbed wire fences, the white steeple of the Methodist church, the wooden crosses behind it. 3 days of wind had sheared the snow flat against every vertical surface, and the smoke from 1,000 chimneys had vanished into walls of white, so thick a man could lose his way between his own front door and his woodpile. Before we go further, settle in wherever you are tonight. If you are listening from somewhere warm, kitchen, rocking chair, kitchen counter with your hands deep in bread dough, let us know in the comments where you are tonight. We love knowing who is with us. Now, let me tell you how a man came to be carried out of that white, and why a black doctor in 1883 rode 93 miles through the worst storm the territory had seen in 11 winters to save a child he had never laid eyes on. Somewhere in that white, on a ridge where the sage had been pressed to nothing, something was moving. It was a horse, a mud-colored mare with ice in her mane and a dark stain spreading across her left flank where the saddle had chafed through to the hide. The horse was walking as if she had forgotten how to stop. Behind her, half frozen to the animal's back, hung a man. The man's hands were still holding the reins. That was how the settlers at the first cabin he reached knew he was alive. The dead let go. He had not. They carried him into the kitchen and laid him on the braided rug by the fire. A woman named Clara Marsh peeled the frost from his face with the back of her hand. She looked at the leather bag strapped across his back and the photograph in the inside pocket of his vest, and she asked him, when his voice came back at last, why he had come. "My name is Dr. Samuel Holloway," he said. "I came to save your boy." He had buried his own daughter in February. He had not yet stopped counting the days since. Ruth Holloway had been 7 years old. She had died of diphtheria in a hot room in Ohio, while her father rode 40 miles through the night for medicine that hadn't made it in time. He had carried her to the woodshed himself because the ground was too frozen to break, and he had wanted, somehow, to give her a roof, even at the end of it. He had held her hand until her fingers cooled. He had not been a doctor then. He had become a doctor to keep that from happening again. He had read every book he could borrow. He had walked from Ohio to Montana because a man could walk where his grief could not follow fast enough to keep up. He had hung a shingle in Helena in 1879, in paint so faded now that it was more memory than mark. He had been the only black physician in the territory. He had been, in 3 counties, the only physician who would answer every door. He was not the only physician the white settlers would answer. 4 years after he hung his shingle, Dr. Holloway had earned a reputation that did not surprise him. He was good. He knew the tinctures. He knew the new ether. He knew how to set a leg and bring a child through a fever and read the look in a woman's face when she would not say out loud what she had come to say. He was permitted, in certain houses, to be present when the white doctor was not. He was tolerated, in certain churches, in the back pew. He had learned that his welcome had a border around it, and that the border moved but never quite arrived where he stood. He kept a tin of hard candy on his desk for the children who came to him looking frightened. He had not, in 4 years, allowed himself to look at Ruth's photograph. It was in the top drawer of his desk, beneath the ledgers of bills people had not paid. He had moved his cot to the closet of the back room so he would not have to see the photograph in his own light after dark. This was the man who received the telegram on a Thursday morning in February 1883, 2 hours after the weather had begun to turn. He was reading by the gas lamp when the boy came running up the stairs of the feed store. The boy was 12, with a face red from the wind, and a paper folded twice in his hand. Dr. Holloway paid him a nickel and unfolded the paper and read it standing up. He read it again. He sat down very slowly in his chair, though his hands had gone perfectly steady. To Dr. Samuel Holloway, Parker Ridge, boy age 6, pneumonia. No other doctor will come. Storm inbound. Please. Clara Marsh. Parker Ridge was 93 miles north, through the Belt Mountains, by way of a single wagon track that climbed to the Continental Divide. In summer, it was a 2-day ride. In winter, on the better mornings, 3 days. In a blizzard, it was a thing no one did. The last man who had tried, a freighter named Pete Withers, had been found in the spring, sitting upright against a stone wall, with a cigarette still in his hand. Dr. Holloway knew this story. Everyone waiting for him in town, at the photograph in the drawer face down, of a girl with her mother's smile. The county sheriff's name was Harlan Briggs. He had been, in his middle years, A man who decided who was welcome in the territory and who was not. He controlled who got the good land, who got hauled before the magistrate, who got the railroad spur that fed the mines. He did not control the weather. In this one matter he was a man of small power. He came into Dr. Holloway's office that Thursday afternoon with 2 men behind him and snow melting on his boots. He was holding a copy of the telegram. "You are not riding out today, Doc." He was smiling when he said it. He always smiled when he said something he expected to be obeyed. "Because if you die out there, I'm the one who has to certify it, and I have a wife who doesn't like the paperwork." His men laughed. Dr. Holloway did not. "It is not the paperwork you are worried about, Sheriff." "No, Doc." Briggs set the telegram on the desk. "It is not. A black man on a good horse in this territory, alone, with a bag of medicine and a pocket full of money. That is a man who gets shot in the blizzard. That is what I am worried about. I am being neighborly. I am being your friend." He did not ask for the telegram back. The sheriff was not lying. He was not telling the truth either. He was telling something that had been true in other places, that a black man alone was a target, and could be made to look, after the fact, as though he had chosen the danger himself. The sheriff had made men disappear before. Not by his own hand, by his patience. Dr. Holloway picked up the telegram. "How many boys under 10 died last winter in this territory, Sheriff?" Briggs stopped smiling. "I do not follow." 14. "I signed 7 of the death certificates. The other 7 I was not allowed to sign, because the families would not let me into the house in time. 4 of those 7 I could have saved, with the ether and the bark, if I had been permitted at the door when they called me." He let the sentence sit. "What are you going to do then, Doc?" Briggs asked. He was not smiling now at all. "Ride out at first light, bring the boy back alive, or come home and certify his death. Either decision I will make on the road." Briggs looked at him for a long time. He did not draw his weapon. He said, very softly, "I will remember you said that, Doc." "Good," Dr. Holloway said. "I would like you to." The sheriff left with his men. The snow was falling faster than it had been when he came in. Dr. Holloway made his preparations in an hour. He wrote 3 letters. He left his good coat and his good boots by the fire, and put on the old ones. He packed his medical bag with ether, with laudanum, with the tincture of bark he had learned from a Crow grandmother 20 years before, with cotton wool, with a square of oiled silk. He packed dried beef, coffee, the tin of hard candy, and the small photograph of a girl he had not allowed himself to look at in 4 years. He tucked it into the linen pocket inside his vest. His landlady, Mrs. Tate, knocked on his door at 11 that night. She had never, in 2 years, entered his room without permission. She set a jar of honey and a tin of peppermints on his desk without comment, and stood at the door with her arms crossed. "You watch yourself out there, Dr. Holloway." "I will, ma'am." "You watch yourself come back too." She left him with that. He heard her weep on the stairs. He saddled the mud-colored mare at 4 in the morning. She was not his horse. She was the liveryman's horse, and he had paid for her with his last week's fee. And the liveryman had tried to give him a different one, and he had insisted, because the mare was older, and the mare was wiser, and the mare had been through 3 blizzards already that he knew of, and he trusted her more than he trusted himself. What would you have done if you had been Dr. Holloway on a Thursday night in 1883, with a sheriff's threat folded in your pocket? Would you have saddled the old mare at 4 in the morning, or would you have told yourself it was pride you could not name, and stayed by your fire? He set out at first light. By the time the sun rose he was 3 miles out of town, and could not see his own tracks behind him. The first day was not so bad. The snow blew sideways, but he could still see. He had not yet known the Montana high country. He would learn. At noon, where a creek crossed the road, he met a young Crow rider on a black pony. The young man was about 20. He had a woolen blanket over his shoulders and a rifle across his lap, but he did not raise it. "You are the doctor," the young man said. It was not a question. "I am," they said. A black doctor was riding out. "I am also black." "Yes," the young man said. He had a smile on his face. "I had heard that too." The young man's name was Thomas, who walks softly. He had lost a brother to winter starvation 4 winters before, and had been trying to make his way south for work, and had been snowed in like everyone else. "You don't have to turn around with me," Dr. Holloway said. "I am not turning around. I am going where I am going. North. I will go with you a while. Then west. That is a very small while to be useful. That is the only kind there is." They rode 3 hours. They did not speak for most of it. At the top of a hill, Thomas unsaddled and stamped his feet in the saddle blankets and swung back onto his pony. The storm will come harder tonight. The wind has changed on its ear. You will have to make a choice at the pass, Ridge Road or Creek Road. The Creek Road is longer. The Ridge Road is shorter. I would take the Ridge Road, thank you. You are welcome. Do you have a photograph of her? Who? Her. The one you tucked into your vest. Thomas nodded at the pocket over Dr. Holloway's heart. I can see the edge of it. I would hold it tighter if I were you. With all your hands. The wind will take it if it can. Dr. Holloway took the photograph out. It was a daguerreotype of a girl of 7, with long dark curls, in a clean blue dress. He looked at it for the first time in 4 years. He put it back inside his vest and pressed it flat with the palm of his hand. Thomas rode away down a white line and into nothing. Dr. Holloway watched him disappear, and he rode on. He took the Ridge Road, a wagon track that climbed to 8,000 feet and dropped down the back of the Belt Mountains into the Parker Ridge Valley. The wind was waiting for him on the ridge. The wind had been waiting there all day. He did not stand a chance. The second day was the worst. He did not want to ride, and he rode anyway. The mare's left flank opened to the air, where the saddle had chafed through. He tried to dress it, and the wool froze before he could get the bandage to lie. He gave her 2 peppermints from inside the vest and kept on. He lost feeling in his toes first, then his fingers, then his face. He took the photograph out at one point, in the middle of the day. Ruth was smiling in the picture. She had always been smiling in pictures. He said her name out loud, into the wind. The wind did not take it kindly. He was singing a hymn on the 3rd day when he understood that he was dying. He had not intended to sing. He had learned it from his mother in Ohio. He had sung it to Ruth in her cradle. He had not sung it since. By afternoon the wind had died to a whistle, and then to nothing, and the snow was falling straight down for the first time, in soft feathers, the way it falls when it has already won. The mare was walking in a circle. Dr. Holloway could not tell very well where the road was. He could not tell very well where the horse was. He could only tell that the wind was not on his face. That was enough. The cabin appeared as a gray shadow on a hill. There was smoke in the chimney, the color of butterscotch, the color of a life inside a room. He made it to the door. Clara Marsh opened it. He had to slide off the horse by himself because no one was there to help him. He fell, more than climbed, to her floor. The mare stood behind him in the door, breathing hard, fogging the empty air. My name is Dr. Samuel Holloway, he said. I came to save your boy. If this story is moving you, you are exactly who we wrote it for. A like and a subscribe tells us to keep going. He was, by the time he lay still, the second black man Clara Marsh had ever met, and the first black man she had ever seen in her own home. Her husband, John, had been killed by a falling tree in the fall of '81. She had been alone on the ridge with 6-year-old Eli for 14 months. She had no family left. She had no money. She had sent the telegram the night before because she had heard, from a circuit preacher the previous summer, that there was a doctor in Helena who would come if she asked. The boy was in the small back bedroom. She had moved him to a cot by the stove because one of the windows had cracked. He was breathing in shallow pulls. A child of 6 should not have that color in his face. Dr. Holloway did not, at first, look at the boy. He looked at Clara. He had been raised, by his mother, to look first at the people around the patient. They were the ones who would have to keep the child warm, who would have to crush the ice for water, who would have to hold the boy's shoulders still while the ether did its work. He looked at Clara's hands. They were cracked from the cold. The hands of a woman who had been chopping wood for fuel and had not hit it 3 times out of 5. He looked at her eyes. He knew what he saw in those eyes. He had seen it once before, at the end of a winter, in Ohio, in the face of his own wife. Mrs. Marsh, he said, I am going to save your boy, or I am going to lose him from this room. He will not die alone. That is what I can promise you. She nodded. She did not thank him. She understood that this was not a moment for thanks. He worked through the afternoon. He did not have the strength, at first, to lift the boy into a better position. He sat on the floor with his medical bag open, and he mixed the ether by hand. He let the boy breathe it from a rag, and he watched the boy's eyes go glassy, and he lifted him then, with Clara's help, into a sitting position. He set his ear against the boy's chest and listened, and held his breath, and listened again. The pneumonia had not yet settled in the right lung. It was in the left, and it was loud, but the right was still clear. The boy was strong. He gave him a swallow of laudanum. He gave him a syrup of willow bark. He laid a hot poultice of pine resin across his chest and bound it with the oiled silk. He made Clara brew coffee, and he gave the boy sips of it, sweetened with the honey, between spoonfuls of medicine. He did not sit down for the next 11 hours. On the second night the fever broke. The boy's color changed. The breathing slowed. The cough, which had been the coughing of a small thing trying to throw something off its back, softened into something the lungs could manage. He opened his eyes and looked at Clara, and smiled at her, and Clara fell asleep with her hand on the side of his face. Dr. Holloway covered her with a quilt without saying a word. He sat in the rocking chair by the stove and did not move again that night. On the third morning, the boy ate a boiled egg. He did not vomit it back. On the third afternoon, Clara set broth in front of the doctor in a warmed chair, and he ate it, and he cried a little into the broth, for reasons he could not name, and she did not ask. "I lost a daughter, ma'am," he said. "I lost her in Ohio. She was 7. She had dark curls. I had not said her name out loud in 4 years, until I said it to the sky on the second day, in the storm. I think the sky heard me. My husband," Clara said. "He was a good man. He had a kind laugh. He was killed in October. He was buried in his coat. He was not finished asking me questions. He was not even most of the way through asking me questions. I have been standing in this kitchen 14 months, waiting for the next one, and it has not come. The question is coming, ma'am, but not today. Today it is soup and rest. Tomorrow it is soup and rest. The day after that, the boy will be strong enough to ask you a question of his own. He will, in fact, ask you why the doctor is black, and you will give him the answer you decide to give him. And that will be enough." She was quiet. The boy coughed gently in the next room, in a way that was no longer a danger. "Why did you ride out, Dr. Holloway?" she said. "You could have stayed in Helena. You could have written a letter. You could have sent someone else. Because my daughter died, ma'am, and I could not bear for her that one more boy had died alone because I was too tired to climb on a horse." She set her hand on the table, palm up. He did not take it, and she did not push it. It sat there, between them, the way the question had sat there for 14 months. She said it quietly, almost to herself. "Strange how the things you've given up on tend to find you when you stop looking for them." He didn't respond. There was nothing to add to that. He stayed 2 more days. On the third day he could stand without assistance, and the boy was eating bread. He packed his bag with care. He tucked the photograph of Ruth back into the pocket inside his vest, where it would stay for the rest of his life. "Walk me out, son," he said to Eli. The boy walked him out to the mare. The mare had been rubbed down and fed, and was looking considerably better than the man. The boy looked up at the doctor, with the look that children give a man who has come for them out of nowhere. "Why are you black, sir?" the boy said. "Because my mother was, son, and her mother before her. It is a family matter. We will discuss it later." The boy nodded. He seemed satisfied. He handed the doctor a folded paper. He had drawn, with a burnt stick, on a piece of brown butcher paper, a horse, the mare, with a dark patch on her flank, ridden by a man with a bag on his back. Dr. Holloway folded the paper in half, and put it inside the pocket with the photograph. On the road home, the blizzard had stopped. The pass was open. The sun was out. He came down into Helena on a Wednesday afternoon at 5 o'clock, in front of 100 witnesses, with the boy Eli asleep in front of him on the mare. What waited for him at home was Sheriff Harlan Briggs. Briggs had spent the 3 days writing a warrant. He had arranged for a deputy at the livery stable. He had prepared a small speech. He was not prepared for what he saw. Dr. Holloway was the only doctor in the territory to have ridden the storm and come back alive. The mayor came out of his office. The preacher came out of his church. Mrs. Tate came down her stairs with a kettle of hot water and a clean pair of socks. The black families, who had not, in 4 years, dared come to the office door in daylight, came out, and stood on the street, in the slush, 12 of them, women and men in their good coats, holding a paper they had signed between them while the doctor was on the road. It was a petition. It had 142 names on it. Every settler in the territory who had ever employed Dr. Holloway had signed it. It called for the sheriff's resignation and the appointment of a new man. It called for the railroad spur to revert to the territory. It called for the doctor to be paid, in coin, for the 14 children he had signed death certificates on the previous winter. The sheriff read the petition. His face did a thing his face had not done in 20 years of office. The men behind him did not laugh. The crowd behind them did not move. "Sheriff," Dr. Holloway said, "I have your message. I am bringing it back to you as a signature on a paper. Briggs did not draw his weapon, he did not speak. He turned, very slowly, and walked toward his office, and did not look back, and did not return to the livery stable that day. By the end of the winter there was a new sheriff, and a new magistrate, and a public meeting at the Methodist church where every man and woman, black and white, who had signed the petition spoke for the doctor. He did not attend. He had a young boy to walk back up the mountain. He had a question or two to ask of Clara Marsh when he got there. 41 years later, on a porch overlooking a green valley north of Parker Ridge, Dr. Samuel Holloway sat in a rocking chair in the late afternoon and watched his grandson read aloud from a book of frontier history. The book's spine had cracked at the chapter on the Great Montana Storm of 1883. The boy read about a freighter named Pete Withers, who had been found sitting upright against a stone wall with a cigarette in his hand. The boy did not know that his grandfather had ridden through that same storm 3 days and 3 nights to bring his father into the world. Beside him, in the other rocking chair, Clara Holloway knit a sock. She had not stopped knitting since the day he had come through her door. The needles clicked softly in the warm air. The boy turned a page. The doctor closed his eyes. The photograph of Ruth, in its frame, stood on the sill behind them, next to a small drawing of a horse, in burnt stick, on brown paper. He had walked 3 days on bleeding feet to get to her door. He figured he could manage one more hard conversation. Next, we will tell the story of a deaf woman sent to a remote ranch by a family ashamed of her, and the blind rancher who saw her worth from the moment she arrived. We will see you there.